Hello friends, welcome back. This is Ramya again. I have around 10 years of experience as quality assurance professional, and today we're going to speak about QA metrics, right? The moment you speak about metrics, many people say, it's okay, it's a very boring topic. But friends, understand, I've seen many people today who are freshers, who are juniors, even some of the mid-level folks, they don't understand what exactly do you mean by metrics, what is an artifact, is it really so important, right? Because all of us are automation, automation, automation. All of us are so focused on coding because that is what the industry is demanding. Yes, fine, yes, that's true. But then, as and when the experience gets added to your profile, it is very important for you to understand what exactly do you mean by a metric? Why is it so important? What are the different kinds of metrics? All those things, okay? So let me give you a real-time example before we go into the technical details. So the real-time example is, let's say that I'm a developer, okay? So we are 5 developers and you're a QA, you're 3 people, right? 3 QAs and 5 developers, right? Of course, all of us belong to the same Scrum team, but we are 5 developers and you're 3 QAs, and there is one product owner or product manager, and there is one Scrum master, there is a client, right? So now, how are you going to tell as a QA team what is the progress with respect to QA? How many defects you have raised? How much of testing has happened? How much of execution has been completed? How much is still pending over? Are there any critical defects? Are there some blockers? Are there some abstractions? Or you're struggling to get some data? You don't have the API information. You don't have that endpoints or whatever is it, right? How will you know? I mean, how will you let the external world know that what is the progress with respect to your team? What is QA progress? What is QA doing? Right? Your project manager comes and asks, what is QA doing? And how will you tell to your project manager, oh yeah, we are doing well, everything is going good, fine. No, friends, it does not act like that. It does not work like that in software world, right? Everything should be in terms of data. Come on. How will you prove that you have completed 50% of execution of test cases or 70% of execution? Is there any proof? And that proof is nothing but metric. Okay, see here, dear project manager, these are the metrics. See, this is the execution status, right? See, these are the blockers, right? All these things are really very, very, very important, friends. So let us see today what exactly do we mean by metric and why is it required and what are the different kinds of metrics, all those things, okay? Yes. So just one second. Yes. So we'll see. So what is a metric? Any kind of documents, anything. It can be a document or it can be something on the web or it can be some images, anything that you tell to the other people in your project or outside your project, telling that, see, these are the progress, this is where we stand, all those things. Anything that you share with respect to QA team as to what do you want to do, what is your plan, or where are you exactly, what is your progress, have you completed something, everything. All those things are called as metrics and artifacts, okay? So why do we need metrics, right? So we already saw that, right? When someone either from inside the team or outside the team asks, what exactly is QA team doing? Are we moving in the right direction? Will we be able to complete all the planned testing activities on time? Are there any risks? Are there any blockers or critical or major bugs? How much of time is required for testing? What are the complexities involved, right? How many resources are required? How, when you say resources, it can be in terms of number of people, number of testers required. Are there any technical gaps, right? How much of time is still required to test? How many bugs are there? Were there any production bugs? What is a test coverage, right? When people ask you what is test coverage is nothing but what percentage of software application is being tested by test cases, right? We'll see that this is one of the metric. We'll see the test coverage, somewhere later in the video, okay? So now, friends, all these questions are really very important for you to be a responsible QA member, it is very important for you to answer all these questions to your both internal stakeholders and external stakeholders, right? So all these questions should be answered to make sure that QA team, we are transparent. Friends, most of us today work in agile environment. Okay. So when you say agile, what are the three solid principles of agile? Transparency, adaptation, inspection. You have to tell the external world, see, this is where we stand. You have to be super transparent. That is very important in agile. Okay, you don't have those luxury of time like waterfall to say, okay, fine, see, we are still in this development phase, so QA team has not yet come up with a test scenario, so that's okay. I mean, of course, one by one is waterfall, right? Basically in agile you don't have the luxury of time, so you have to be super transparent. Okay, and then adaptation. What is adaptation? Some other requirement came, or some requirement got changed, something got deleted. You should be able to adapt to these scenarios. What is inspection? Have you seen other videos where we speak about introspection or retrospection, sprint retrospection meeting that happens at the end of every sprint, where we say what went well, what did not go well, or were there any hurdles? All those things will be a part of this inspection, right? So these three things are very important, friends, right? So use metrics to improve the test process and to showcase where we stand to stakeholders. Okay, friends, this is all about, are we moving in the right direction? All those things, answering all the questions that we just now saw. Okay, this is why metrics is really very important, friends. Now, how do we calculate metrics? Okay, Ramya, I got to know what is metrics, why do we require metrics, but then how do you calculate? Friends, there are two ways of calculating metrics. One is called as absolute way and other is called as derived way. Okay, and to be very honest with you, there's no much use, or there is no much thing that we can get from absolute way, right? I mean, number does not tell you anything, right? Number does not tell you anything. For example, let's say somebody is 50 years old, 50. Okay, let's say somebody is 50 years old. Does that mean that he's successful? Yeah, really? How do we know? Well, let's say that somebody is just 15 years old, 1 5. Does that mean that they have not done anything in their life? No. Age is just a number. With respect, I mean, just because somebody is 100 years old does not mean that they are successful, right? So age is just a number. With a number, you can't tell anything whether something is right or something is wrong, right? So that is what absolute metrics is all about. So we'll see what is that. Now, absolute metrics. Absolute metrics just give you numbers and does not help to answer any of the QA process, right? It does not help you to give whether you're giving the right quality product to the customers or not. It will not answer that question, but it is one of the things that can be used, initially, but not in the long run. Okay. For example, QA has written 1,000 test cases, let's say. So just because you write 1,000 test cases for your application, does that mean that there are no bugs? Does that mean that there are no critical blockers? I mean, critical bugs or blockers? No. 1,000 is just a number. You can do efficient testing with even just 200 test cases, or you can do just average or even horrible testing with 1,000 test cases, right? So this is what absolute metrics is all about, friends, right? So examples of absolute metrics. How many test cases have you written? How many test cases passed? How many failed? How many are blocked? And how many defects you found, how many major or critical or blockers defects, and how many minor and trivial defects are there, and how many defects got leaked into production. Okay, so what do you just take some 5 seconds and think, friends? Any of these questions, will it help you to answer this question? Are you moving in the right direction or not? Are you providing quality product to customers? No, friends, no, you can't. But this is a good place to start, right? So this is what absolute metrics is all about. So now let us see what is derived metrics. And it is this derived metrics which is crucial for you to tell all about QA, whether as a QA, are you successful as a team? As a Scrum, of course, Agile is not only about QA, it's about the entire Scrum. So are you successful as a team in providing quality product to customers, right? On time, very important. So let us see what is this derived metrics. So this is useful to tell how QA team has performed in providing better quality product to customers on time. When I say QA team, don't take just QA team, it's the entire Scrum team. But QA is explicitly responsible for quality of the product, and that's why I mentioned QA team. Okay. So remember, it is all about cost of testing, time taken for testing, and scope of testing. Friends, Agile is all about quality and speed. I'll repeat, Agile is all about quality and speed. When I say speed, how much of time have you taken? I can give the product after 1 year, after 6 months. Speed. But what good is a product with so much of bugs just because you have given on time? Quality. Cost of testing, scope of testing is also equally important, right? So we'll see that derived metrics in a while. But before that, I want you to answer this question, okay? How to say that QA team is doing a good job? How do you say that you're a good QA team? Or as an individual, how are you going to say that you're a good tester, friends? I'll give you 5 seconds time. Think about it. How will you say that you're a good QA team? Or how are you going to say as an individual tester, you're a very good tester? 5 seconds. Think about it. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And here we go. Of course, there is no standard answer for that, but most of the things are going to be covered here, right? So some of the factors that can be considered to say that your team is a successful QA team, good estimation of user stories. You should be able to tell as individuals and also as a team collectively how many hours is actually required for you to complete testing of this user story. Estimation is really very important, right? And resolving the conflicts in requirements. Okay. And you have to tell, is there any conflict? If you test this requirement, then this requirement will break. Like some conflicts, some dependencies on the requirement. For example, one of the requirement is if a user has used a password for your application and he should never use the same password in any other application. How will you even know? You can't control other applications and it is not testable. So you have to tell what is the scope of testing, what you can test, what you can't test, and are there any conflicts? Are there any requirement gap? Right? All those things. It's called a static testing, right? All those things that tells that you're a good tester. Then test coverage should be very good, right? So what percentage of the application, in fact, how many lines of code? Let's say that your application has 1 lakh lines of code and your test cases cover 90,000 lines of code, right? That means test coverage is 90%. We'll see that in detail later. And regression suite should be very, very strong, right? If there is just one thing that I can say, just tell one thing that can define a good QA, it's regression suite. Very important, right? So defects rejected by the developers should be minimal compared to defects accepted, right? When I say minimal, I don't say less. When I say minimal, it's absolute minimal. Let's say as a tester, let's say you have tested 5 user stories. Okay, as an individual, let me speak. Let's say that you have tested 5 user stories and you raised 10 defects. Out of those 10 defects, whatsoever reason, developer comes and saying, no, this was not there in the requirement, so I did not implement. Of course, then it has to be converted into an improvement or whatever works in your organization, right? Or your developer could have missed that requirement, or your developer could have misinterpreted the requirement and would have developed in some other way. So basically, if these are the bugs that you have raised, right? And the developers want to come and argue, no, this is not told, that is like this, and all those things. Whatever is the reason, right? If at all you have raised 10 bugs and at 1 or 2 bugs gets rejected, it's still okay. But then what if 5 bugs that you have raised got rejected, telling it is not a bug at all, right? Unless and until it was missing in the requirement, that's a different case. What if you did not understand the user story well and you assumed certain things and you raised it as a bug, whereas that was not expected functionality, right? That shows your level of understanding of those things. So if many bugs that you have rejected, or even half of the bugs that you raise gets rejected, that shows that you're not a good tester, right? So make sure that defect rejection is not more in your case, okay? That is one of the great quality of a beautiful tester, right? And defect leakage into the production should be less than 5%. Some companies accept till 10%, but usually 5% is a norm. test effectiveness should be at least 95%. That means no matter how good testers we are, because see, basically I was working in one of my previous organizations where one of the module called as inventory, right? Supply chain management domain, inventory. I was responsible for the entire module. It is just one tester versus 1 lakh users. You know, approximately 1 lakh people in India were using that application. I mean, only in India. Different countries, it's more than 10 lakhs, right? Can you think about this, friends? I'm just one tester for that module versus 1 lakh users. How much ever I try to cover the test cases, positive scenarios, negative scenarios, manual testing, automation testing, still, can you compare one person with 1 lakh people? There will be some scenarios, right? Where you wouldn't have even interpreted, okay, such things exist, is it? I didn't know this. For example, uh, there was a mobile app and they were trying to do something. They submitted something. By the time they click on some submit button, some other person calls them. So what happens to that submit call? Do you even get such scenarios while testing? No, right? But such things happen in reality, right? So defect leakage will happen no matter how good you are. But the question is, keep it minimal. Don't make it so obvious, right? A very obvious defect leakage is not acceptable, right? So what is defect leakage? I hope you know, right? Defect leakage is testers were not able to identify the defect even in UAT. Also, okay, fine, forget. We'll see what is defect leakage later. Let me not confuse you, okay? And defect leakage should be very minimal for a good tester or as a QA team put together, right? Collectively. Now, good automation scripts that are effective. You have to write automation scripts that are effective, which actually find bugs. Because I myself have experienced this and I'm also seeing as a pattern. People write automation scripts for the sake of it, right? Oh, you have automated this test case, so many percentage of test cases. But what good is your automation script if it can't find bugs? That's the question, friends. And many of us are failing in this, right? So your automation scripts should be effective. It should be able to find bugs and good reviews from customer. Okay, fine. This company, this team is so good. So whatever business that I want to expand, I'm going to give it to this organization itself because of the reputation that we have developed with the customer, right? This is also, so if you have all these things or most of these things, or there might be other things also, right? Just comment below if at all you come up with some other parameters. See, this is a dynamic thing. There's no fixed thing. So these are all few things that you can say that you're a good QA team, right? Now, remember we're speaking about derived metrics. We'll go to derived metrics. Okay, derived metrics in terms of Agile. Burn down chart or burn up chart. We can tell how much of work is already done or how much of work is still pending, where we stand with respect to these charts. We can speak about sprint velocity, defect removal efficiency, number of tests run in how much of time, total test duration, defect leakage, defect density, test coverage, defect spillover. So these are all the common things that we speak, friends, when it comes to metrics, right? So we'll see this one by one, okay? So burn down chart. Okay, so this is one of the famous interview question. What is a burn down chart, right? So burn down chart is nothing but you want to tell the other people, the other stakeholders know where we stand, how much of work is already completed and how much of work is still left over, and are we completing all the user stories that we had planned at the starting of the sprint in sprint planning meeting, right? See here, on the y-axis, it is always story points. How much of work is planned for a sprint? Or how much of work, not for a sprint, for the entire release, okay? This burn down chart is going to tell you. Of course, there is sprint wise also, so we'll talk about this, right? So let's say in your product, right, there are 120 story points. 120 story points in your entire product. Let's say, assume, okay? And x-axis is all about time taken for you to complete those sprints, for you to burn all the story points. When I say burn, it's nothing but complete all the story points, right? Burn down is nothing but completion, okay? So now, You have in your product a total of 120 story points, and there are 7 sprints. So your project manager, all of them put together, okay, fine. There are 7 sprints needed for us to burn this 120 points. So how did they come up with the 7 sprints? There is something called a sprint velocity. Okay, I'll speak about it next. But for now, let's assume that 7 sprints are required for 120 points to be burnt. Okay, but then all 120 points you can't do it in same sprint, right? We require 7 sprints. But each sprint there has to be some output. Let's say in sprint 1 you burn down 10 story points, in sprint 2 20 story points, in sprint 3 15 story points. So everything put together should be 120, right? So this is burn down. Burn down is nothing but top to bottom. There is one more way of representing, that's called as burn up. Burn up is nothing but bottom to up. So people say it's the same thing. Yeah, it's almost the same thing. It's a same, I mean, you're representing the same thing, right? How much is planned? What is the time taken? How much is already done? That's all this is all about. But burn down, there is a drawback. Burn up is better. Okay. So let me tell you why. Hmm. So I hope you are able to see this, right? So burn up. Let me tell you the difference, friends. So 100 story points are there in your product, and let's say that there are 7 sprints. Okay. And what happens in your first sprint? Let's say in your first sprint, you burn down 10 story points, and you put a line like this. Okay. You burn down 10 story points. That means what? That means you have remaining is what? Remaining is 90 story points. Correct. But Agile is dynamic. It's not static. Your product owner is going to come and say, hey, you know, there is some urgent requirement. Client called me or somebody else called me. And in product backlog, we are adding some other user stories to make sure the feature becomes more beautiful. So from 100, they added 20 story points. So now it is 120 story points totally in your product backlog, right? Sorry. In your product backlog, now there are 120 story points, and those 20 story points got added in sprint 2. Okay, but now sprint, when you started sprint 1, it was 100 story points. You burnt 10 story points in your sprint 1, so now it had become 90. Okay, but then 20 got added in sprint 2. That means now it is 110. Correct, 90 plus 20 is 110. And in sprint 2, you are burning 20 story points. Sprint 1, you had burned just 10. In in sprint 2, you are burning 20 story points. But the problem is, now it is 110. So 110 minus 20 is 90. That means before you started sprint 2 also, it was 90 story points remaining. After you are done with sprint also, it is 90 story points remaining. So it's as good as telling you have not worked at all, right? The team did not do anything in sprint 2. True, but that is what the chart is telling. But that's false. You have burnt 20 story points. So this is the drawback of burn down chart. It does not show whether there were any variations in the product backlog. Okay, that is why I say burn up is really very important, and it's explicitly telling. Okay, so let's see burn up now. So in sprint 1, how much you had burnt? 90, sorry, 10, right? So it had become 90 story points. But then in 20 story points got added, right? 20 story points got added. So this was your, what is this? The other line that I'm writing, okay? Let me see if I can make it. Sure, let's forget this, okay? The other horizontal line that I've written is the product backlog, okay? So there were 100 story points, you burned 10, so remaining is 90, okay? The remaining story points is 90. But then now 20 got added in sprint 2, right? So what is going to happen to your product backlog line? Even that's going to get increased. See here, in sprint 2, this product backlog line got increased. by 20. That is why now it has become 120. It has become 120. Don't worry about the alignments and all, okay? But then in sprint 2, you have got 20 more story points. That is what I want to show here. See here, you have earned 20 more story points in sprint 2. Can you see this difference, friends? Now the remaining story points can still be 90, but can you see here? You are explicitly telling that your your sprint team has, your Scrum team or the QA team has burned 20 more story points. But the problem is 20 more story points got added, and that's not your problem. Can you see this is the difference between burn down and burn up? There's a famous interview question. When burn down is there, why burn up is required? Or what is the difference? Why burn up is better? Okay, I hope you understood the difference. In burn down, because of the variations in product backlog, it can seem obvious that the Scrum team or your team, right, QA team particularly, has, if you have your own burn down chat, it's as good as telling that you have not done anything in the sprint, which is a nonsense thing, right? Do you think people want to allow you not to do anything? No, friends. You have still worked. So explicitly, it is telling in the burn up chart, some story points got added. See, that is why there is raise. That's from 100, it became 120. But whereas we have also burned 20 story points, right? So, but then this is how it should be. It has to be horizontal. Sorry, one second. It has to be horizontal, friends, from here to here, because it is still 90, right? It is still 90, it cannot go now, right? So eraser, okay, sorry, this mistake I made. See why I'm writing a horizontal line, because story points are still 90, right? 110 minus 20 is 90, okay? But then you understand that you have done the work. That's the difference, okay? So this is one of the famous metric. Now we'll continue. Yes. Okay. So the next metric is sprint velocity. This is again a very famous interview question. What is sprint velocity, right? Now I told you, right, in the burn down chart, for example, burn up chart here, they have told you you require 7 sprints to burn this 160 story points. How do the team know that you require 7 sprints? It can be just 3 sprints. It could have been 100 sprints. How on earth will your team know that you require approximately 7 sprints, right? It's because of sprint velocity, friends. For sprint velocity, you should have history. Let's say it's a brand new project. You have to start everything from scratch, which means there is no history. In such cases, you cannot come up with sprint velocity. After 2 to 3 sprints, you will get an idea. Okay, as a team, how much are we burning? Or how much of story points are we completing approximately in every sprint? So now we can say, okay, fine. Okay, let's first calculate and let me continue this. Let's say in sprint 1, you have completed 40 story points, or you have burned 40 story points. In sprint 2, you have burned 50 story points. Sprint 3, you have burned 35 story points. Now, total number of story points that is burnt is what? Add 40 plus 50 plus 35, right? Add all those things. That is, I think it's 125, yeah? And divided by total number of sprints, 3. So 125 by 3, right? Which is approximately 41.6 rounded off to 42. That means you can complete approximately 42 story points in a sprint. 1 or 2 points here and there is fine. So now from 4th sprint onwards, when somebody asks you, what is the velocity of the team? You can say it's 42. And how did you come up with that number? Because of the history. Because in each sprint, we were burning so many points divided by the number of sprints. I got the velocity as 42. This means if there are 160 story points or 210 story points, just for easy calculation, if there are 210 story points remaining in your product backlog, you can easily say 200 divided by 42, I require approximately 5 more sprints before the release happens, right? 5 more sprints. But the question is, there is something called as regression testing also, which has to be done. So they'll add 1 more sprint and last, okay? So 5 plus 1, 6 more sprints before the release happens, okay? Now, this is how you calculate sprint velocity. What is sprint velocity? The number of sprints that we require in order for a release to happen. The sprint velocity. And how do you come up with that? With this calculation, right? So I hope it is clear. Very important to understand what is sprint velocity, friends. Next one, defect removal efficiency. So you can say, so Ramya, sprint velocity is not something that's related to QA. No, it's not related to QA, but you have to know what is sprint velocity. That is one of the very important metric. Okay. So now defect removal efficiency. What is defect removal efficiency is number of defects found internally as a QA team divided by number of number of defects found internally as a QA team plus number of defects found externally. The whole thing into 100. So when I say internally, of course, it's your QA team. Straightforward, you understand. What do I mean by externally? So it depends on organizations again. I have seen organizations where QA team themselves perform UAT also, or there is a separate UAT team. In such cases, when there is a separate UAT team, even UAT, if they are finding some bugs, which the QA team has not found, that is also considered as a leakage. Okay. So let's say QA team themselves perform UAT also. Then in that case, it's considered as internally. Okay, it all depends on the company, project to project, right? So externally, if some production, what is a production? Some client found a defect. Definitely that's external defect, right? So this is defect removal efficiency, right? Somebody asks, see, how do you calculate defect removal efficiency? This is the formula. Let's say that as a QA team, you found 100 bucks. Okay. And let's say there's a separate UAT team, they found 10 bucks, and client team found 10 bucks. Just an example. So 100 found internally divided by 100, which is found internally, plus external, which is 10 bucks of UAT plus 10 bucks of what? Your clients. So that's 20. So 100 divided by 120, whatever is the number, into 100 is defect leakage. All right. That is defect leakage. Removal efficiency is that. Let's say, so 95% is your defect removal efficiency. That means 100 minus 95 is 5% is your defect leakage, which is a very good QA team. Okay. 5% is still okay. Anything less than 10% is still considered okay, but some companies are very strict. You should not go more than 5%, right? Most of the companies are following that. So this is defect removal efficiency, friends. Very important metric. Next is number of tests run in how much time. What's the total duration, right? As I told, Agile is all about speed and quality. Within those 2 weeks of sprint, how many test cases you have executed, and in how many cross operating system, cross browser, right, cross platform, all these things. How much iterations is there, a regression suite that you had to do, and how much of iterations that you have done, and in how many test environments you have done. Is it QA environment? Sometimes it's also called as staging, UAT, or production. Very important for you to tell all these data to the external stakeholders, telling that what exactly did this QA team doing on a daily basis. Okay, or as a metric in this sprint, what is that you have done. Next, defect leakage. This is reverse of the defect removal efficiency, right? That's what we saw. So defect leakage is nothing but number of defects found in UAT divided by number of defects found in QA testing. So let's say in UAT you found 10 bucks, and defects in QA environment, QA as internally you found 100 bucks, right? So 10 divided by 100 is what? 10%. So defect leakage is 10%. But now, production bugs, right? See, there are different ways of calculating it, but the second formula is the best, okay? UAT plus production. Now again, it all depends on you, whether UAT, QA themselves are doing, or no, there's a separate UAT team, all those things. UAT plus production is the actual defect leakage. So the second formula is the best, okay? The third formula I have written because what if QA team themselves are doing UAT? So that is now counted as internal bugs. In that case, only production bugs become external, right? So number of bugs found in production divided by number of defects found in QA testing, this becomes defect leakage, okay? Next, defect density. What is defect density? Number of defects that you have found per 1,000 lines of code is called as defect density. Of course, nobody has time to see, okay, for 1,000 lines of, how many lines of code are there in our project, so how many bugs that have identified, and this bug belongs to which line of code. Nobody can do it practically, okay, but definition wise, per 1,000 lines of code, how many bugs that you have found is defect density. Okay, so let's say in an e-commerce application there is product search functionality, there is login functionality, there is add to cart functionality, there's checkout functionalities. Let's say for some reason in checkout functionality there's a lot of bugs, right? Of course, we would have categorized our files. There's a checkout file, let it be JavaScript or Java, whatever your developer is following. There is a add to cart file, right? So let's say in checkout there's a lot of bugs. So in those part of the application, in the checkout module, there's a lot of bugs. So that is where the defect density is too much when it comes for checkout module, we say, right? So how do you, so one more question that people ask is, how do you decide what has to go as part of regression testing, right? Whichever module has so many bugs, whichever module is highly unstable, definitely that you have to take it as part of regression. Whichever is newly going into this sprint as a part of increment or as a release, you have to take consideration for regression testing, friends. Okay, so defect density is nothing but how much of defects you have found in what module or per 1,000 lines of code. This is what you can say. Then this is very important. Next, test coverage. So what percentage of the software application is being tested by test cases, right? As I told, if your software, again, this comes like percentage or per 100 lines of code, whatever, right? For example, if there are 100 lines of code and our test scenarios, let us take only positive, okay, for this, just for the sake of simplicity. Your positive test cases cover 80 lines of code. That means test coverage is 80 by 100, which is 80% test coverage. Okay, but then negative also has to be there, right? So test coverage is nothing but because of the test cases that you have written, how much of your application is actually being tested. That is test coverage. Okay. Next, defect spill over means, let's say that 10 bugs were found in the current sprint, but developer got time to fix only 6 bugs. That means 4 bugs are still in the open state. See, those 6 bugs that were fixed and were put to QA, you might still reopen it, telling that no, I retested it. This is still not fixed. I'm going to reopen it. So, but we'll talk about that reopen state later. But let's say out of 10 bugs that you have raised, only 6 got fixed. Developer did not get time to fix all the 10 bugs, which means 4 bugs are still not fixed. So those 4 bugs have to be deferred for its fixation in the next sprint. So this is nothing but spillover from previous sprint task or the previous sprint bugs or defects you're taking to the next sprint, which is still in the open state, right? That is called as defect spillover. So it's not only open state, it's reopen state also. So total number of bugs in, that is defect spillover, is total number of bugs in open and reopen state divided by total number of bugs raised and accepted. What if your defect is rejected? That is not counted. Only if your defect is accepted as a defect, and if it is in the open or reopen state, that is going to come into picture for defect spillover calculation. Okay, friends. So these are the different kinds of metrics that you must know to make sure that you are providing a good quality product to your customer. Very important, right? As I told, absolute metrics is of not much use because it's just about numbers. Derived metrics is what is going to tell you. You have to tell what is burn up or burn down chart, what is sprint velocity, defect removal efficiency, number of tests run in how much time, total test duration, defect leakage, defect density, test coverage, and defect spillover, right? So if there is any other metric that you're following in your project, please comment it below, okay? And this is all about QA metrics. It's not only for the sake of interview, you have to know all those things. So I always say, change your attitude. It's not about, I need to do this because industry is demanding. No, you have to do this because because of your work. If your customer's life gets enhanced in a better way, that gives a lot of fulfillment, right? So that's a great motivation for us. Otherwise, it just becomes a boring job. That's how I look at my work. So I'm telling. So these are the different QA metrics, friends, and it's very important for you to know all these things. Please share this video with all those people whom you think it is going to help them. It's going to enhance your knowledge. And please comment on your feedback. So if there are any doubts, please ask. I'm always there to answer your queries. And fine, this is all about QA metrics and